BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, some good news on rural crime, but livestock theft remains high.
Our worst fears was confirmed. We realised that the sheep had been taken out of the field, took up while they sank in, so it did. Big financial loss.
Could a trade deal with the Gulf states open the door to low welfare meat imports?
If anybody feels that our poultry sector is open to be targeted in future trade negotiations, we'll have the US coming back to the table saying, well, look, you've done it for the Gulf. We now want a piece of that.
And despite warnings from the Climate Change Committee, the Scottish Government says it will not reduce livestock numbers.
We believe that we can get to net zero by taking another policy direction that doesn't include reducing livestock numbers.
More on that later. Let's start with the weather. The heatwave has made it an uncomfortable week for many of us and a difficult week for farming, with temperatures in the 30s and expected to peak later today. Some farmers are, of course, also contending with drought. So what can they do to protect livestock and crops from the worst of the heat? Well, let's talk about crops first. Andrew Blenkiron is Managing Director at the Eldon Estate on the Norfolk-Suffolk border. They grow a lot of root vegetables and cereals, and he told Anna Hill they've started harvesting their salad potatoes this week.
Potatoes and crops generally have been, irrigated crops have been doing really well in the bright sunshine, so long as we can make sure we give them plenty of water. And I did just look up, and this crop of potatoes we're lifting at the moment had well over 150 millimetres of water applied to it so far this season, so quite a considerable amount. That's, in old money, that's 6 inches, I think, something like that, so that's significant.
So they're drinking quite a lot, aren't they? What about the other root veg? I know you've got onions, carrots.
Yeah, onions they've had about 60 millimetres of water, and they're growing really well. They sort of target of having the 8 leaves by the 21st of June. They're very much on target for that. Carrots, we grow late harvested carrots, so we've only just finished planting them actually. And for the first time, I think maybe ever, if not certainly for a long time, we had to irrigate the field to plant the carrots.
What about wheat and barley, cereals? Are they suffering because of the lack of rain and the heat?
Yes, they are. Starting with the winter barley, we gave that sort of 30 millimetres of water in the middle of April, and that kept it going really well. And it looks as though it's quite full of promise, although we're probably budgeting 20% yield reduction on that over our 5-year average. The spring barley is really, really struggling. So, and indeed, we have the effect called the Breckland swale or the Breckland stripe, which shows up and it makes it very obvious the areas of the cereal crop that are particularly dead. And when you put the drone up, you get some very pretty crazed patterns. But of course, it does demonstrate that the cereal underneath that soil or in that soil type has been badly affected and will yield next to nothing almost.
Well, that's interesting because someone sent me a picture of some wheat in the Brecklands and it really looked like it was yellow, the leaves were yellow, but it actually looked like it had crashed over.
Yeah, well, it can have that effect which has a significant impact on yield. We had 5 millimetres of rain here in March, 15 in April, 16 in May. And so far in June, we've probably had about 15, 16 mil. So probably I would suggest that's less than a quarter of the average. So we started irrigating very early here, sort of the second week in April, which is unheard of. And obviously we've had to keep going at it. So there's been a valiant effort by the team here to keep the crops watered and ensure that they'll maintain their quality.
Does the heat make farming more difficult, not only for the crops, but also for farmers as well?
Yes, of course. Well, we've probably all got nice suntans this year. That's the one positive. Won't need to go away to top of our tan anywhere. But it's a real challenge. Like you say, people are not just in an arable situation, but there's a great number of livestock here, and we're having to cart water to them, make sure there's plenty of water, plenty of shade for those animals. So it's a pretty pressurised time. No doubt there's people getting up very early in the morning to ensure that the animals are cared for.
Andrew Blenkiron, well, as he said there, any farmer with livestock has to be worrying about the animals' welfare just at the minute. Indoor animals like pigs and poultry have to be kept cool. For outdoor stock, it's more a question of providing shelter from the sun and, of course, plenty of water. James Keith runs the Organic Pig Company and has around 1,200 outdoor organic sows, producing 400 pigs a week. He told Anna that pigs and heat waves are a difficult combination.
Well, pigs have one or two disadvantages in heat. They don't have any fur and they can't sweat. So they're not naturally adapted to extreme heat. So we provide shade for them in the huts, which we open both ends, and in tents we can lift the back flaps to allow a through draft. We provide wallows for them so they can make mud to put their own sun cream on, and ad lib water supply so they've always got plenty to drink. So they've got shade, hopefully a through draft, and some mud to wallow in. So that's how we try and help them.
Just tell me a bit more about the water then. How do you organise that for them to have a drink?
Historically, outdoor pigs all used to be fed out of a wallow trough, which one pig would be trying to have a drink and its mate would then climb in it and think it was having a bath, which was never very hygienic. So in the last 10 to 15 years, most outdoor units have gone on to multiple nipple drinkers on large tanks. So we have a ring main of water coming off boreholes or even the mains into a 500 or 1,000 litre tank, which is very often on stilts now to hold it up. So the nipples at the bottom of the tank are at the right height for a pig to drink from. So they've always got access to clean water.
Do animals grow more slowly when they're too hot?
They get less hungry, so they lose their appetite, and so they would just lie about. So yes, their feed conversion would drop because they're not growing as well. Extreme heat can cause distress, and no animal grows well when it's in distress or under stress.
Can it be good news having nice, warm, sunny weather for pigs?
Yes, it's very good news for the people who work with them. So the stockmen like it. They're walking around in their leather shoes and their shorts and their big sun hats. It's a nice environment to work in. Pigs probably grow better in February when they stay in their little warm tin huts and huddle up to each other, and that's when they probably grow their best. But the stockmen, it's a real challenge to work out there when the rain is horizontal, biting cold, your hands are freezing, and it's a pretty miserable existence. But in the summer, it's a nice place to be.
Now, I know you also make fountains. That's partly to fill up those wallows, isn't it? Pigs are so wonderful, aren't they? Their piglets are very playful, aren't they? Do they play in the fountains?
Our older piglets, still suckling on their mum, would have access to a wallow, and they love it. They on a hot day, they're in and out of there, and they're running back to their huts, and then they run back to the swimming pool again.
Sounds like they're on holiday. And finally, what's worse for you, drought or heat?
The biggest problem if it's very dry is the electric fences don't work so well, because the pig, when he stands next to the electric fence, doesn't earth so well because he's standing on dry sand. And that can create an issue. But extreme heat and loss of water supply, it would be our biggest worry. In the winter, if it freezes, the demand is so much lower, we can cart water round to them, and that's not such a difficult job. But in the summer, if you have a problem with your water and you get behind, you've got to cart water, you can't really catch up fast enough as the pigs, because there's so many of them. Pigs demand so much water.
James Keith there from the Organic Pig Company. Now, the good news is that the cost of rural crime has fallen. New figures from the insurers NFU Mutual this week show a 16.5% fall last year. The costs are put at £44 million in comparison with £52 million the year before. The biggest fall is in the theft of agricultural vehicles, and the number of animals killed or injured in dog attacks was also down by a quarter. But livestock theft remained high. Stealing farm animals has been linked to organised crime, and in Northern Ireland it seems the current high stock values are making them even more attractive to criminals. BBC Northern Ireland's Niall McCracken reports.
The theft of animals is a crime that dates back centuries, but in recent years it has followed the wider trend in rural crime, becoming highly organised and often involving a large number of animals being taken in a single raid.
Unfortunately, we're gone and not to be returned.
In January 2024, Dermot Mullen woke up to find that 50 lambs had been stolen from his farm near the village of Park.
Just thought they were in a neighbour man's field, or they just escaped out onto the road. The next thing then we sort of, our worst fears was confirmed, and we realised that the sheep had been taken out of the field. Took a while to sink in, so it did. Big financial loss, which is an impact then, and it has a serious impact on your mental health as well.
Dermot isn't alone. Figures obtained by BBC News NI show that there were more than 3,000 animals reported as stolen in Northern Ireland since 2019. The vast majority were farm animals such as sheep and cattle, and most of the reported thefts took place in rural council areas like Mid-Ulster and Causeway Coast and Glens.
I'm John McLennan, Deputy President of Ulster Farmers Union. There's evidence of organised crime being involved in this, and it's not just a matter of taking livestock. There has to be somewhere for them to go to. It's not opportunistic, it is planned well in advance, and I suppose what we've seen is that the value of that livestock has increased, the value to the criminal and the incentive to the criminal has also increased. So that's why we would urge farmers to take all the steps that they can to protect the livestock.
A spokesperson for the PSNI added that on occasions there can be a link to organised crime and cross-border criminality, and when these type of cases arise, they work closely with police in the Republic of Ireland.
The bigger picture, I suppose, it has to be looked at as well, of where these animals going to, and can more be done to stop this. Very important that people comes forward and comes out and talks about it and reports it, because devastating effects on so many people.
That report from Niall McCracken. The National Farmers Union has confirmed it sent a private letter to the Prime Minister, raising concerns over a prospective trade deal with the Gulf states. It says the deal could open the UK up to imports of low-welfare meat from the Gulf and, more importantly, many other countries around the world. Although meat from the Gulf states might come up to UK hygiene standards, some welfare groups are concerned about the conditions animals are kept in and the intensive nature of production, especially poultry. Anna spoke to Tom Bradshaw, the National Farmers Union president.
We're hearing very worrying rumours that poultry might be part of the deal with the GCC, and we really can't square that. Our standards of production are something we're very proud of, and their standards over there are pretty well non-existent in comparison to the standards we have to produce to.
Do you actually know that? What are the poultry production methods in the Gulf states?
Well, I think that is the challenge, actually, Anna, is that it's very difficult to understand that they have those production standards that we have. And without those core standards of imports that we've been asking for, so that imports have to meet our standards of production, it would be very difficult to understand exactly what those Gulf standards of production are. And look, we've stood really firm with the US, and we can't give other trading countries a belief that if they push hard enough, then there's going to be an opportunity to open up the market. So this isn't just about the Gulf Cooperation Agreement. It's about what signals it sends to other trading partners around the world. And we really value the work that the government have done to date, and they can't undermine it within these negotiations.
But then the DEFRA Secretary of State, Steve Reed, told the NFU conference just this year that the government, and I'll quote him, will never lower our food standards in trade agreements and will protect our most sensitive sectors. So aren't you reassured by that?
We have been reassured with the words that Steve has said and with the work that's been done to date. But we know that across government there are differing views on some of this. And what we can't do is take any of this for granted. And I think we are sufficiently worried at the moment around the negotiating position that we decided we would take the unique opportunity to write to the Prime Minister. This isn't something that we do routinely, but we are very spooked at the moment about the conversations that we're having, and we want his commitment that they will withhold those standards, as they have done so far.
In the past, the NFU has been quite positive about a trade deal with the Gulf states. Back in 2022, the NFU said the deal looks overwhelmingly positive for UK exporters. So there are two sides to this, aren't there?
Absolutely. I mean, generally, it's a deal that we would be very optimistic about. The opportunities that exist, they import a significant proportion, over 3/4 of the food that they eat there in the GCC is imported. So there's real opportunities there. We've already got a strong cheese export market. But if we could reduce the dairy tariffs, then there's opportunities for our wider dairy industry. There's opportunities for our sheep sector and lamb exports, particularly, again, if we could remove those tariffs on frozen sheep meat, which at the moment stand at 5%. So there are sectors where there's opportunities, but that doesn't mean that we can afford to risking importing poultry from the desert at a time where we've been so careful to uphold our standards of production within the other trade negotiations. We can't drop our guard at this moment in time.
How much chicken would the UK realistically import from the Gulf states, though?
I think that this is more about the principle it sets to other trade negotiations in the future. We cannot undermine ourselves in any trade negotiation because everybody is watching on. And if anybody feels that our poultry sector is open to be targeted in future trade negotiations, not just the GCC, but we'll have the US coming back to the table saying, well, look, you've done it for the Gulf. We now want a piece of that. We'll have Brazil, and so we've got to be really careful at the signal this sends out to other countries around the world about whether our poultry sector is in scope or not.
The NFU President Tom Bradshaw there. Well, in a statement, the government told us we will only ever sign trade agreements which align with the UK's national interests, and we will not lower our high food standards, including on animal welfare. Today is day 3 of the Royal Highland Show being held just outside Edinburgh. I went for the show's opening day on Thursday and, as always, started in the cattle lines. There is an air of calm efficiency around me. I've come down to the cattle lines. The noise you can hear is the air conditioning that they create to keep these animals cool on what is an absolutely beautiful day here. The other noise you can hear are the hair dryers, because it's really important that these animals look their best when they go into the ring. So let's go and find out how things are going.
I'm from Cumbria. I'm here helping a friend show cattle.
What sort of cattle are you showing?
He's got Belty Galloways, Charolais, Limousins and Belgian Blues.
How important is doing well at this show?
It's just a showcase. Just a showcase for your own stock and get your name out there, and to do it you have to do it right, and everybody wants to be the best at the time.
It's a lot of work, isn't it?
Oh, it's a lot of work, yeah. I don't think anybody really understands how much work to do it properly anyways. So.
What are you showing?
Belty Galloways.
Why have you come? How important is this show?
Oh, it's magic for Scottish farming.
So have you had a shifty round at everybody else?
Some good competition. A lot of good animals here. Yeah, a lot of good animals.
Now, one thing that all these cattle have in common is what they're wearing, because all of them have ID tags in their ears. Now, that's because all cattle movements now across the country are traced. But the system is changing, both in England and here in Scotland. Well, to explain all this is Robert Neal, Vice President of NFU Scotland. Robert, let's start with how the system works at the minute.
At the moment, it's all manually, so you've got to read every cattle tag, and that's going to correspond with the passport. So every animal in the UK has got a paper passport, like every human being's got a paper passport. So that official number on the tag has to correspond with the official paper passport.
So why change that system?
Well, we're in the 21st century and we need to go to the digital age. So we're wanting to use electronics to help trace and capture data from every animal in the UK.
Here in Scotland then, how will that work in the future?
So the chip on the tag, a digital chip, you'll be able to read with your scanners. It'll help health and safety. You can read cattle tags from a distance. It'll take out the human error.
But the system in Scotland isn't going to be the same as the one in England. What's the difference?
So Scotland have legislated that we're going to use UHF, which is ultra-high frequency technology, which is the new digital age, in my opinion. And England are going to go down the low frequency technology.
If I get my cow tagged in England, it will have a tag that you can read with a scanner still, but it just won't be quite as efficient as the one in Scotland, which has better technology. What does this mean for cattle moving from England to Scotland or vice versa?
There'll be no barrier. You still can read the tag manually for cross-border movements. If markets, abattoirs do not want to embrace the technology that Scotland is embracing, they just have to read manually, and vice versa.
People who are not involved in farming will be looking quizzically at their radio at the minute and thinking, why on earth can't we just have one system?
That would be absolutely fantastic if we could all work together. UHF, ultra-high frequency, is new technology. It's still not proven 100%, but it's about developing and making sure that we're at the forefront worldwide in technology. For the greater good of the industry, we need to work together and collaborate.
Robert Neal there from NFU Scotland. Well, livestock really are at the heart of this show. So there was some concern yesterday when the Scottish Government announced its emissions targets, which call for a 57% cut over the next 5 years and more after that, in line with recommendations from the Climate Change Committee. But speaking here at the show, Scotland's Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Mari Goujon, told farmers the government was rejecting the committee's advice to reduce livestock numbers.
This government has no policy and will have no policy to cut livestock numbers.
Well, as we discussed on this programme earlier this week, cattle numbers in Scotland are continuing to fall. Quality Meat Scotland, which represents and promotes the red meat sector, wants to see an increase in numbers to combat meat imports. Mari Goujon told me that the Scottish Government is supporting farming.
That's really what I'm trying to put forward. We have no policy to reduce livestock in Scotland. Also making clear our commitment to support for the sector. So the over £600 million we have available for direct support, our voluntary coupled support schemes, our less favoured area support scheme as well. So we are committed to maintaining that support. When you look at the suckler beef scheme, we're continuing that until at least 2028, at which point it will form part of a future framework.
I want to talk about the future budget in a minute, but let's just talk about those livestock numbers. You say there are no plans to reduce them, but actually that might be helpful because you've got ambitious climate change targets to meet, haven't you?
It's actually not helpful for them to reduce much further because it's not just our farmers, that's critical, but you've got to look at the wider supply chain, the processing sector, the abattoirs. We've got to make sure that our rural economy is sustainable and there's that throughput for that.
How do you meet the targets though and maintain livestock numbers?
Well, we believe that we can get to net zero by taking another policy direction that doesn't include reducing livestock numbers. Well, there will be a whole host of policies that in different areas that we've been working on. Now, we know that there are methane inhibitors for feeding, as an example. We could well see that scaled up in future. We've introduced calving interval to our suckler beef support scheme. Again, that's about making herds ultimately more efficient. There's some incredible work going on in Scotland just now in relation to genetics, low methane breeding, agricultural machinery. There are all sorts of different areas that I think we can look at that means that we can still keep our livestock in Scotland, but we're just going to take another direction and look at other policies for that because we also need livestock, not just for food, but wider biodiversity.
Let's talk about the budget. The Scottish Conservatives have said at the show here that in their manifesto next year they will have a multi-annual budget for agriculture. So at the start of the Parliament, agriculture will know what it's getting every year. That's a sensible approach, isn't it, for an industry which relies so much on planning?
Oh, we've long called for multi-annual funding because obviously when we were members of the EU, you had that certainty. Businesses need that certainty. So we've had the spending review from the UK government, but it's the further detail and the multi-annual budget commitment that we need to see next, and then that enables us to plan for the future. But of course, we're still getting our budgets on an annual basis. But I think as soon as we get that multi-annual funding commitment, that's the point that we can consider that and set that out to industry.
You're standing down in that election. People are already coming up with report cards. Scottish Wildlife Trust and WWF Scotland says the Scottish Government is failing in that it's just giving 5% budget for agri-environment schemes. The majority of the money will go in direct payments to farmers, which they're saying is not going to help meet challenges on things like biodiversity.
Well, we are in a process of change at the moment. We want to work with our farmers and crofters as we do it. That's absolutely critical. I appreciate, that does actually take more time. It takes more time to try and get things right. But I think that the approach we have taken is absolutely the right one. We're also adding conditions to that support. But again, it's the working with the sector, working with other ENGOs too, to make sure that as we develop future policy, we do that in a way that works for farmers and crofters.
So this is your last Highland Show as Minister. So what will you be doing this time next year?
I honestly have no idea. The job has been so busy. I'm currently taking the land reform bill through the Scottish Parliament at the moment, which is keeping me very occupied. So I genuinely haven't had a moment to think about it. So yeah, but I'm excited by whatever comes next.
The Scottish Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Mary Goujon. Now, let me remind you, you still have time to nominate someone for the BBC Food and Farming Awards. Farming Today has again teamed up with the Archers for the Farming for the Future Prize. We're looking for people who are making farming more sustainable, both financially and environmentally, or coming up with great new ideas. To nominate someone, and feel free to make that yourself, go to bbc.co.uk/food awards, where you'll find the terms and the privacy notice. Nominations close at midday on the 30th of June. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.